All right. Good morning, everyone, for this special edition of the MSP Success webinar series. Happy to have all you on here. Very popular topic here, and Frank and I were just talking about this. I think we really hit a nerve here, Frank, of something, and this is going to be really cool with it. You and I have talked about this a ton. Happy to bring this to the MSP Success audience here. For everyone that doesn't know Frank, this is Frank DiBenedetto. Frank is it now former owner of Two Rivers Tech, MSP?
It is, yeah. As
All
of
right.
July 1st, bittersweet moment, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So Frank has actually been. I'm wearing my Producers Club jacket here from TMT. Frank was a Producers Club member for as long as I've been here at TMT, MSP Success with Robin, for 15 years, roughly something like that. 15 years as a TMT Producers Club member, very successful, highly profitable MSP. He started also, you may know Frank from Audit, the software. And then also Frank is really spinning up this really cool thing that I think fits a need for a lot of MSPs in secure payments. And so we're going to be talking about the compliance gap in your stack that's leaving you wide open to a competitor swiping your clients. It's also leaving you liable, but I'm not going to steal any of that from you, Frank. I'll let you really get into it here because we got a lot of stuff to cover here over the next hour. And so let's just go ahead and dive in.
Cool. Thanks, Chef. So, quick little anecdote here. You were just in Newark, New Jersey, I think, at one of Robin's road. That's where I first met you, and you were still an MSP at the time. And I remember you were on stage as a panelist. I think it was at CMIT.
Yep. Yeah, and I was it was kind of one of these road shows type of thing, and that was probably the last one that I did there. Did one of the road shows, and that was where Robin and I kind of talked about me selling the MSP and coming on board. So it was probably that one.
Yep. So I'm that old anyway.
Very, very cool.
Awesome. Ready. Let me share my screen here and we'll get going. Awesome. All right. So Jeff already gave me a very gracious intro, so we'll skip through that. But before we get into secure payments, I want to kind of kick it back to a question, and that is, what if I told you one of your clients' backups was failing? And if I told you that, and we asked, like, well, what's the risk in that? What would we be worried about? Three main things here. So number one would be data loss for the client. Pretty obvious, right? I mean, backup's there to back up their data, and if it doesn't work and it was failing, the risk would that we lose some data. We know that, and I remember, 10 years ago, Jeff, when you were starting out as an MSP, backups, that was one of the main reasons why MSPs would get new customers. They would shift from another MSP, was because we used to hear the story, hey, they lost our data. They weren't able to restore data. So client loss is a big risk, obviously, if we're not backing up the data. And then, the fear always is looming of a lawsuit. So there's some possible litigation that could happen if you lost your client's data. So I think we would agree that the risk there is high. So what are the options if I told you that was happening to one of your customers? So one option, of course, not a great one, is you could ignore the failed backup. And let's face it, if you don't need to restore the data, it's not really an issue at that moment, right? So if we see it and we catch it, it's okay. Typically, we just get that backup working again and we go on our merry way, and then, and now it's working. So we could ignore it, not a great option. Or we could resolve the issue as soon as possible, which is, of course, what everybody would do. So if I told you that it was failing, you would get one of your multifunctional IT pros to look at it, diagnose it, and they would get it back working. I mean, it's clearly something in the wheelhouse of one of your techs. We call them multifunctional because most MSPs don't have dedicated backup specialists, right? That guy's doing backup, then they jump over to doing patching, and then they go over to fix a printer. So they bounce around, but it's clearly something that they have the skill set to deal with. So I make that point because backup is essentially your best insurance policy. If something was to go wrong, we know that the most critical piece for any business is their data. We want to make sure that backup is there and working should all else fail. Now, let's raise the stakes a little bit. Like these days, now we're looking at ransomware. And we know that, typically backup isn't enough. When all else fails, all our cybersecurity stack fails, that last line of defense is actually an insurance policy, right? So I know we call backup, kind of an insurance policy, but now I'm talking about cyber insurance, right? So that net these days is typically our last line of defense. If all of your EDR and SOC and MDR and antivirus fails, ransomware hits, many times the cyber insurance is all that's left. So what's the risk if we didn't have cyber insurance, right? Well, there's a very good chance that client is going out of business, right? The ransoms are high. Most of these businesses can't weather the extended downtime of negotiating. Even if you pay the ransom, there's no guarantee they give you your data back. You will most certainly lose that customer, right? So even if they get their data back and they, pay some crazy ransom, I'm sure that MSP is going to get bounced out of that customer. And litigation probably goes up even higher now because they meaning the customer, will likely blame you as the MSP for the failure of the security products. You'll probably be tied up in some sort of litigation. So what if I told you that 73% of your clients would have a cyber insurance claim denied? When we look at it, our statistics have shown that about 81% of MSPs overlook this fact. They're not even aware of it. However, we know that 100% of them will be held liable. If there's no cyber insurance policy in place, or if the claim gets denied, the MSP is going to get blamed, and there's going to be a huge issue to deal with. So in today's webinar, what I'm going to cover is how we can reduce this risk within 60 days or less at little to no cost to your MSP. And really important, you're able to win new logos in doing them. So with what I think is the best prospecting tool since the dark web. So let me tell you a quick story first. As Jeff mentioned, I had an MSP, it's Two River Technology Group. I was based in New Jersey, built that business up to about $5 million of revenue, and I exited recently in the month of July. But back in 2021, I got a call from one of my customers called Navicent Country Club. And they said that they thought they might have had a credit card breach and they wanted me to come in to discuss their cybersecurity. So, of course, we came in to meet with them. And the first question that they asked at the meeting was, don't you handle our PCI compliance? Now, I've been around long enough to know that compliance is a little bit tricky. That, despite our best efforts, we don't always know if the customer is truly compliant. So before I answer that question, let's deep dive real fast into what PCI compliance is. So PCI is quite simply a set of rules that have been put in place by the credit card processors to make sure that anybody that accepts credit cards or electronic payments protects that credit card data. It's quite simply there because what do the bad guys go after? They go after the money. So what's the best place to try to hit? It's the source where the money gets transacted. So there's just guidelines that are put in place. So my customer is wondering, am I helping to protect them? Now, if we go a layer deeper, PCI DSS shows that there's 12 compliance areas. And of course, what I found was that most MSPs cover this in their typical managed services offering. So if you look at things like firewalls or passwords, implementing antivirus, doing patching, putting policies in place, these are the types of things that every MSP handles during the normal course of managed services. So it would be really, really difficult for me to tell my customer, or any MSP to tell their client for that matter, that they weren't handling their customers' PCI compliance. The very nature of managed services touches on much of these 12 areas. So we are involved whether we like it or not. Now, I've talked to some MSPs and some of them say, I don't think my clients think that we handle their PCI compliance. And others, I think wisely say, yeah, I think my customers do feel like we're doing. And I'm in the camp that says you absolutely are handling some aspects of PCI compliance, whether you like that or not. So after all was said and done, it was determined that the issue had nothing to do with those areas that I would traditionally cover, things like on the network antivirus or network segmentation. It actually had to do with the payment gateway. It gets basically who they were processing the credit cards through. And it turns out that that processor did not maintain current hardware. All the hardware, the things that we tap and swipe our credit cards or our phones on these days, they all have an end of life on them. and you're required to make sure that they're in life. Otherwise, you could be deemed as PCI non-compliant. And that's what happened with Navison Country Club. Somebody came in, they made some fraudulent charges in their pro shop, and the end result was that Navison Country Club was held liable for those fraudulent charges because the processor deemed them to be not PCI compliant. So you could see why I was drawn into that conversation, and I had a little bit of a, an uncomfortable feeling from that customer. The issue too is that I really didn't have visibility into the merchant processor, and I didn't really know anything about hardware end of life as it relates to that. So how did we know that the customer was not compliant? Like, what was the smoking gun, right? Because we know that compliance sometimes can be subjective. Well, this is a copy of their merchant statements. No, they never looked at this, and I've now found that most customers don't. These are usually contained in a portal somewhere. They're not usually emailed. But if you go looking for them, what we found for Navison Country Club was that the merchant was actually charging them $24.95 to be non-compliant. I couldn't believe my eyes. Most of our customers are one of our main verticals is financial services, and FINRA is the governing body there. I have never seen FINRA charge one of my clients a fee every month to not be compliant, yet let them continue to transact business. We have some healthcare customers. I've never seen HIPAA charge a fee on a monthly basis to a customer to not be compliant and let them continue to transact business. However, what I found was that the merchant can charge a PCI non-compliance fee, in this case, $24.95, and my customer, Navison Country Club, can continue to do business. It was amazing to me to see this, and this was a big eye-opener for me. So here's a fact. The merchant processor is a huge PCI compliance blind spot for the MSPs. Most MSPs have no idea who those merchant processors are for their customers. And in fact, the merchant processor actually makes more money if the client is not PCI compliant. What we found when we started to analyze statements was that on average, 61% of the MSP's clients accept electronic payments. Now this is up. Prior to 2022, we found that the numbers were closer to 50%, but it's risen primarily driven by a few things. One was the pandemic. So more people shifted to electronic means of getting paid because we couldn't collect the paper checks and get to the banks like we used to. And also what we're seeing is the younger millennial generation are now starting to take root in a lot of businesses, and they're looking at more modern ways of transacting business. What that also means is that 61% of an MSP's customer base is also subject to PCI compliance. When we surveyed MSPs, most of them were not sure which one of their clients accepted electronic payments. Now, I think, Jeff, you're going to pop up a survey here just so we can survey our audience right now. But so let me repeat that, right? Do you know with certainty how many of your active customers are accepting electronic payments? When I ask that question, typically I get, usually the last two of maybe and no, I definitely don't know with certainty. All MSPs pretty much know how many customers they may have, but a lot of them I have found do not know exactly how many accept credit card payments.
Yeah, Frank, and we're seeing here, I'll publish the poll. If you haven't answered it, I see a few are still answering. So it's about 23% are saying, yes, I can name them. 40% are in that maybe bucket, and then 38%. So really it's like 79% are in either maybe, but I'm not unsure. I'm unsure about some. And then no, I definitely don't know with any certainty here. So I'm gonna end the poll here. I see a few more still coming in with this. I'm gonna end it just so you guys can see the data on there.
Cool. So for simplicity, let's call this about 80%-ish that are not certain, right? So if you don't even know which one of your customers definitely take electronic payments, how could you know which ones are compliant? Yet the crazy part is that most of those clients think they're being kept PCI compliant by the MSP. The reality that we found is that 73% of the clients are not compliant. That's a huge number. So how do we know that? Well, we talked about the credit card statements that we analyzed. So since 2001, when we started to get this program running, we've analyzed thousands of these statements. And we found time and time again that these customers are paying a PCI non-compliance fee. Here's another look at a statement from a company called Global Payments. And this one's pretty interesting because not only are they charging the customer $89 a month for something called a network security and compliance fee, but they're also charging the non-compliance fee of $69.95. So what you're seeing here is that this is a revenue stream for these merchant accounts. And it's kind of the Wild West here. Most people don't look at the fees. A lot of people don't even know that they are PCI compliant. So the bottom line is that MSPs truly do lack the visibility into that payment gateway. And the clients are totally unaware of those fees. If you think about it, if the downstream customer of an MSP knew they were PCI non-compliant and paying a fee, they would do something about it. So when we find that 73% of them are not compliant, that means 100% of those customers are unaware of it, because why would they ever choose to do that, right? So what's at stake for the client if they are non-PCI compliant? So number one, that gateway merchant has notified the client of PCI non-compliance. It's right on their statement. Now, just because they don't download the statement or look at it, that's willful ignorance, right? So they can't hide behind that. They've been notified. Number two, the client's paying the non-compliance fee every month. My customer is paying $24.95. They're basically accepting now the liability for a breach. That's how this works. If you're non-compliant and you accept it and you're paying a fee to be non-compliant, what you're signaling to the merchant is that if something should happen, you're now responsible for it. And that's what happened to my customer at Navicent Country Club. Because they were non-compliant, they were held liable for the fraudulent charges of a couple $1,000s, right? There was nobody that came and made them whole on that. And the third one, which is huge, right? So this ties it back to where we started earlier, is that they've likely violated their cyber liability insurance policy. So how do I know that? Well, one thing I know for sure is that every cyber liability insurance application has a question on it. And it asks if the applicant is currently compliant with PCI. And I know I've helped my customers fill these out at times, and in some cases, maybe the customer has filled it out themselves, but everybody checks yes. I mean, does anybody ever check, no, I'm not compliant? No, of course not. And if we look on all these applications, they're all the same from all these different carriers. They ask that question. They ask, are you compliant? And you say yes. However, if you are paying a fee every month, and if it's black and white on that statement that you're not compliant, there's a big issue here, all right? So this is an article from about a year ago, and Travelers basically said that they wanted out of the claim. It was a ransomware attack. They wanted out of the claim and said they want no part of it, because they alleged that the applicant had checked off that they were using MFA, and when the claim was filed and they looked into it, they were not. And what they said was that statements made in the application were misrepresentation, omissions, or concealment of the facts, which materially affected their acceptance of the risk. They said that they would not have approved that policy if they had checked off no. So think about what could happen here with your customers, right? We already talked about how cyber liability insurance is that last line of defense to probably one of the biggest risks that faces our MSPs and our customers, which is ransomware. All right. If 73% of your clients are sitting in a PCI non-compliant status, yet they're paying for it and accepting it, and they've checked off that they're compliant on the application, they're now in violation. It's no different than the situation that you see here with Travelers. There's a really good chance that that claim is going to get denied. Something bad happens to your customers, good chance they go out of business. So once I saw this with Navicent Country Club, I had to think about what was my real problem here. It wasn't that, well, I'm glad I didn't lose Navicent Country Club and all they lost was a couple $1,000s and we moved on. The real problem was who's going to review and secure the rest of my customers? I had 93 at the time, which means I had 92 left. So that was what was keeping me up at night. So these were the options. So option number one, you always can ignore it, right? I mean, but it's not a great idea. Once you know about it, it's just like the backup scenario. Once you know about it, you can't really ignore it. You need to do something, right? So the risk level is high of losing the client if I do ignore it, right? Because what happens if the client one day does notice the PCI non-compliance fee? What if they call us and say, hey, don't you handle our PCI compliance? And if I say yes, and they say, well, we're being charged here, there's a fee, that's going to sour the relationship. What happens if another MSP comes in there and does that? Don't you think there's a good chance that it could wedge me out of my relationship with the customer? And of course, the last one is the customer could go out of business, right? I mean, if I ignore this risk, one of my other customers could get hit with ransomware. And if there's no cyber insurance to back it up, if all else fails, my customer could go out of business. So to me, this was not an option to just sit here and do nothing. Option number two was what I was going to do, which was to attempt to remove the risk in-house, right? So the risk to my MSP was high as well because of the time and expertise required. So my multifunctional techs certainly have the skill set to go in and to handle backups, but nobody in my team has the skill set to go in and to assess the PCI risk at the customers when it has to do with the gateway, right? For most of our customers, we didn't even know who the gateway was. In addition, we were paying our average tech somewhere between $6,000 to $8,000 per month on salary. For me to try to pull one of those techs away and devote all this time to go through 92 customers to do the research to figure out who's secure, who's not, and then figure out what to do was definitely not going to be cost effective for me. And there wasn't really an opportunity to make money in this, right? So I'd be spending all this time just to go through to find out if the customer is PCI compliant. There was really no revenue to be made. I guess I could have, charged the customer, but I didn't think that was wise, considering that they already thought I was doing this job anyway. And if I did find a customer that was not PCI compliant, like I didn't have an alternate solution to offer to them should they want to move away from their current provider. So neither of these options were very good. So this is why we created Secure Payments, right? So quite simply, Secure Payments protects you from losing customers and helps you reduce the risk in 60 days or less. So let's take a high level view of how we do this, right? So first and foremost is we have a dedicated team of Secure Payments concierge that we've built in New Jersey. These are basically analysts that we've trained to go in to be able to analyze statements and other areas of PCI compliance on your behalf. It's pretty simple. You could see here that everything in blue is what the MSP would do, and everything in green is what we handle at Secure Payments. So there's only two simple steps that the MSP would need to do in this program. So step number one is you would need to export your customer list. So we have instructions for all the popular PSA and CRM packages to help export your list of customers, and your concierge will work with you to do that. Step two is we import that list into a custom portal that we've built. So that portal allows us to bring all the customers in, and it's our interaction point, right? So there's a view for the MSP, there's a view for your customer to be able to take a look, and then there's the view internally here that the concierge uses to manage through those customers. Next step is we provide you with an email template to send. And that's the only two things that as an MSP you would need to do. You get to look at the template. You can revise it if you like. We recommend that you don't, but you're in control. You send that email out. So I sent an email out to all 92 of my additional customers introducing Secure Payments. And from that point forward, Secure Payments does all the work. So they reach out, they schedule a quick 15-minute assessment. They present that assessment back in an easy to understand audit style report. We show them a payment security index of where we feel they are from 0 to 100. Obviously, our goal is to make sure that they are PCI compliant with their current vendor, which leads us to the last piece is that we are here to secure the customer. And then afterwards, every single year, we're going to go back to that client and we're going to analyze and make sure that they still are in a PCI compliant state. If they're not, we'll jump back in and we'll help remediate it. So how do we secure the client? So step number one, or one option, is that we can work with their existing payment merchant and help resolve any issues resulting in the PCI non-compliance. So that's what we did with Navicent Country Club. When we went in there, we found that the hardware was end of life. So we worked with their current processor, and we basically made sure they got new hardware that was in life, certified. They removed the PCI non-compliance fee. They were now deemed as PCI compliant. Fee went away, liability is removed, customer is secured. Second way is we could actually migrate the client to our secure payments gateway. So we do have a solution that we can offer. So how does that work? And why might a customer want to switch payment gateways? Well, so number one, what we found was that once we pointed this out to the other customers that were paying a non-compliance fee, we found that they were pretty upset. Some of them have been paying for months, if not years. And if you look at this case here of $69.95, the customer paying for 3 years, that's over $2,500 that they've now paid to their merchant to accept the liability for any security breaches. It's a lot. And sometimes they said, we've had enough. What do you have to offer? We would like to switch. The other reason is that the secure payments gateway is actually really good. And many times it's better than the current solution that the customer is using. Now, what we found was that the majority of an MSP's customer base is our professional services, right? They're not, the bodegas with credit card point of sale type machines. They're more of like a portal type of system. So as an example, we have a number of accountant clients that accept credit cards. They don't have a kiosk or a terminal there like you're at Whole Foods. They basically say, hey, let's take your credit card. They go into some kind of banking portal and they key in the information. So what they found was that this type of product was way more robust. So we'll go through that with the client, and we'll let them make a decision if they'd like to switch over to something that's better and to get away from that vendor who had been charging them fees for months, if not years. Now, there's an opportunity here to basically pay little to nothing for this program. So how does that work? Well, we've got a rebate program. So we already know that if you go out to dinner and you spend $100, the restaurant doesn't get the full $100. In fact, there's fees that are taken out along the way. The bank gets some, the issuing card association gets some, but some money goes to the payment processor and to the payment gateway. About 50 cents out of every $100 goes there. And this is what drives the entire fintech industry. And it's a multi-billion dollar industry. These fees will get generated if they are using our gateway. And what secure payments will do is we'll rebate a portion of those fees back to the MSP if one of their customers decides to switch over. Now we also have better visibility into their PCI compliance because now we know who the vendor is and we have greater control over it. So as an MSP, it's always nice to be able to have control or knowledge of the vendor as opposed to a third party that you don't have any visibility into. What we found after about 9 to 12 months in the program is that the majority of the MSPs are at least breaking even in the fees that get rebated, which means that we do all the work at Secure Payments. And within a year, basically, this program costs you nothing. So we've reduced the risk on your behalf, and now it's basically free. Another interesting thing happened too. So this happened to me first, but what we found now is that the average MSP in Secure Payments adds about 2 new logos per year. So here's what I did at Two River Technology Group. Once I found out that 73% of an MSP's customers were going to be non-compliant with PCI, I decided that when I was doing my traditional assessments of prospects, why not ask them if they take credit cards? And if they do, why not ask for a copy of their merchant statements? So I started to grab the copy of the statements and I would send it over to the team here in New Jersey and have them analyze it. And I know for a fact that there were 3 deals that we won because I wedged out the incumbent. I basically went back in with my typical, presentation of findings, and we talked about the firewall and the antivirus and all the usual stuff. And then I said, "Do you know you're not PCI compliant?" They said, "No, how do you know that?" I said, "Do you know you're paying $70 a month fee to be not compliant? You're accepting the risk." And then, of course, I say, "I can't believe your current MSP is not handling this for you." And I know for a fact that I won 3 deals based probably solely on this because I drove the wedge. So this is a phenomenal prospecting tool, right? All you have to do is get a copy of the statement, send it over to your concierge, let them analyze it, and within 24 hours they'll send you back to the report, and then you can incorporate that into your presentation. But it's a great way to hit on a unique angle, right? We're always looking for new marketing ideas. So this added, I think, 3 new logos in my business. It drove probably about $10,000 of ARR. Well in excess of what it ever would cost me to be in this program. All right. So let's review some of the benefits of secure payments. And so first and foremost, we're here to mitigate the risk of PCI compliance. Where we already talked about, what the perils are if you are PCI non-compliant. We want to reduce and mitigate that risk within 60 days or less. 2 is we're here to help retain your existing clients, right? So if you're not compliant, the customer finds out, there's a good chance you could lose that customer or they can go out of business. So this is helpful in retention, help you gain new clients, right? So we just talked about how you can use that as a prospecting tool. And last way, it's an opportunity to generate a passive source of revenue. You don't have to do anything after you export that list and send an email. All the work is done by Secure Payments. We do everything. We switch them over. We generate some fees, which would be rebated, which help offset the costs of the program. So how much is Secure Payments? So it's only $399 a month. There is no way in my MSP that I could have found somebody with the skill set, the product knowledge, and that I was only paying $400 a month to. For the most part, the average salary of one of my techs is somewhere in the neighborhood, I think of, about on average $75,000 per year. If I took them away and then tried to have them go through my 92 customers, it would have cost me a ton of money, way more than $400 per month. Now, as some of you have become accustomed in TMT, we love to give discounts, and we certainly have one. So we're offering 25% discount off of that. Now, this is a labor-intensive program. I referenced the team that we have in New Jersey. So we're growing that team, but we do have only a certain number of spots. So we have 10 left right now for the month of September. This discount is good until the end of the month, and then the price goes back to $399. So it's $299 a month. And I think, Jeff, I believe you have a poll here to generate to see who might have interest. So that's what I have for you today. Hopefully this was educational and opened your eye to a risk that MSPs have, whether they choose to address it or not. I think it's one that should be addressed, and Secure Payments is the right program to handle it.
Cool. Yeah, so I just launched it out there. If you don't mind doing me a quick favor on this, we always like to gauge the interest in different products and services in the MSP industry. So if you can just go ahead and respond to that poll right there. And I'm going to leave that up currently right now. I appreciate all of you that are going in and just clicking one of those 3 options. Either of the 3 works fine. Frank, we got a couple questions that were up here.
Sure.
Andre was asking early on here. He said, I've been trying to get clarity on this. Most of the retail stores I've worked with are relying on their processing company to provide PCI compliance. What responsibility do the merchants have beyond the processor's compliance stance?
So every merchant that accepts credit card is going to have some level of responsibility, and it does vary. It depends on how they're accepting the credit cards and what systems they use. There's things like self-assessment questionnaires that need to be filled out where you attest to doing certain things. In some cases, there's vulnerability scanning. You know, we have nonprofits that will accept donations via a payment link on the website. You know, we check those and we see are those safe and secure. So the answer is it depends. But in every instance, if you're accepting electronic payments, you will have some level of responsibility for PCI compliance.
Cool. All right, a couple other questions that are up here, and if you guys have any questions, go ahead and post them up to the Q&A. Robert's asking, what does secure payments do with the client information you collect?
So the client information goes into our secure portal. We use that to be able to reach out to the customer, and then we document everything that we find inside of that. You would meet weekly with the concierge just to review progress in your customer list to show, you know, first step, of course, to figure out who accepts electronic payments. The ones that don't are out of scope and don't need to worry about those. The ones that are in scope, then we go to work. We do a 15-minute or so assessment where we gather up some additional information about how they're accepting electronic payments. You know, it's a discovery process. All that information sits in the portal. It's not shared with anybody, and we solely use it and keep it on file. So that way, in a year after we help secure them, we can go back to that customer on your behalf, and we can do it again. Except now we have the information documented, so we'll know that, hey, you were using Global Payments. You know, we'd love to get an updated copy of those statements. So we use that information to be able to continue to help them maintain PCI compliance.
Cool. Couple more questions that are up here. And just a reminder on that, if you haven't already done so, please just select which of the options that you have. I just wanted to make sure that we get everyone on here. One of the three options around how interested you are in learning more about secure payments. Melvin's got a question here. At $2.99 per month, what is the number of clients needed to break even?
So it depends, right? In this industry, these fees that are generated, it depends on the volume that the customer processes, and that volume could be seasonal. So if it's a retail store, it would stand to reason that fees would be higher in the Christmas month and lower, you know, maybe in the summer months. But what we find is that on average, you will make roughly about $400 per year per customer. So you could do the math there. So you probably need somewhere around 8 customers or so that would switch over to our secure payment gateway to generate the fees. But I'd also point out that if you use it for prospecting and you win a new customer, and what's the average customer these days, Jeff, of MRR? We're like roughly about $2,500 is
It's
what
about $2,500 a month.
Yeah, that's 30,000 of ARR, annual recurring revenue, just by using this as a prospecting tool. So, you know, the fees are there, you know, typically after about a year, they'll build up and it'll offset the cost of the program. But I think the ability to make money is really on the prospecting side.
So a little bit of question on it here, Frank, on what exactly when someone's paying a fee of $2.99 a month, maybe break it down a little bit. Like what are you getting on it? Because there was a question someone was asking him saying, hey, I kind of feel like this is that I'm paying $300 a month for the privilege of selling your merchant services. But I know from talking with you that that's not accurate of what the service really is.
Yeah, no, first and foremost is to help secure your customers, right? So you're paying $299 a month for basically our expertise, for our team of analysts to go to your customers on your behalf. It follows your email, right? So your email introduces the fact that we would be calling, so it's not a cold call. We go in, we tell the customer, hey, your MSP paid for this. It's free. There's no cost to you. We would like to, you know, do a 15-minute assessment to find out and to ensure that you're PCI compliant. And so the $299 a month is basically you're paying for our labor to be able to do that, to find out who's not compliant, to help get them compliant, and then keep them compliant. So again, I couldn't find any cost-effective way to do that in-house at my MSP. I didn't have the expertise, and certainly didn't have anybody I wanted to devote the time to. It would have cost me thousands of dollars per month to grab one of my internal guys and took them away from, from doing things that generate revenue for the MSP to be able to go through this. You're also getting the software, the MSP portal. So that's an interaction point. We've got a couple things coming out shortly, which is the ability for the customer to upload information to a secure microsite to help shorten the length of time that it takes us to do the analysis. Takes a little bit of the sting out of the process. And then the MSP is able to, of course, upload new customers and prospects into it as they go along to be able to add additional people in there so we could do the analysis.
Frank, is there a when it goes to let me talk through this one here. Dave was asking combination of things around kind of the rates and the equipment. What percentage of the rebate goes to the MSP? Is it a set rate or is it variable depending on the customer? Can the customers keep their current equipment? Was a separate question.
Yeah, so it depends on a customer by customer basis. It really it depends on what hardware is there, what systems they have, and those are the things that we're analyzing. So in some cases, we can't switch them to the secure payments gateway quite simply because it doesn't integrate with maybe an ERP or a point of sale system that they're using. In other cases, if it's an attorney and they just go to a banking website, it's easy to have them switch over to the secure payments portal because it's a good one. In terms of fees, that's all over the place. Traditionally, talking just purely fees, it's a race to the bottom, right? So if all I did was knock on doors and if my hook was, hey, I can save you some money on your processing fees, eventually the last guy in there, it's so low that nobody would bother anymore, right? It would go to zero. So it all depends on what the rates are set at. It depends on the volume that they're processing. It depends on who the merchant is. We're splitting it. We're rebating some of that back. There's no set percentage, but like I said, it averages out to about $400 per year per customer.
Yeah, and to be clear on that, because I know I was talking with Will Nobles. Will's one of our coaches, our head coach with Accelerators Club and MSP Launch Academy at TMT, and Will talked about it. Will's actually rolled it out to all of his customers. He's got secure payments that's rolling out at least to his first set of customers. He's got some new acquisitions that'll be rolling out soon as well. He was saying on that of where, there's a time that it takes of being able to get of where people move at different points of what they're doing. Some move, some just get up where it's at, exactly what you talked about before. Some get the stamp of approval that says, hey, you're PCI compliant and everything looks good here. There's no need to move. So there's going to be some that are going to move, some aren't. Will even mentioned to me that he's got someone that's doing $98 million a year in credit card fees. They have not moved over yet, but that's a large check, a little bit more than $400 a year if that particular customer moves over. He has no idea, it's not part of you don't have to be involved in the sales process is what he was telling me yesterday when I asked him about it there. But, if they end up moving forward, again, that's a nice annuity check, basically, that goes to the bottom line for what he's got there. I don't know what type of company that is. Someone larger than he is.
Yeah. We say average because that's what it shows across all of these customers, across all the MSPs that are in the program today. But some of them are high. I always say it's like when you bought baseball cards as a kid and you'd flip through, there's a lot of scrub players and a stale piece of gum, and then you get a Derek Jeter, or if you're old like we are, Jeff, maybe like a Reggie Jackson or something. But there's like that. There's a few, and the processing can be high. I found that the majority of a MSP's customers, again, being professional services organizations, no one's knocking on those doors, right? So if you're on Main Street USA and you've got a kiosk, and people are always coming in saying, hey, who do you use your payment process? I could save you some money. People don't do that to the attorneys, to the accountants, to the financial service professionals, right? So those industries typically just pay whatever the fees are. And in some cases, they could be quite high. So if we come in, we find they're not PCI compliant, we can make them compliant, move them over. Some of them process, quite a bit of volume, and there's a bunch of fees that do get generated. It's just one of the passive benefits of secure payments, right? The main thing that we're doing for Will is going through his fairly large list of customers and helping do all that work using our expertise to make sure that they're all PCI compliant, right? Whether they move over to secure payments portal or not, the goal is to make sure they're compliant, right? To reduce the risk, to solidify Will's relationship. When I did this with my customer base, I had customers that didn't even accept electronic payments email me and say, hey, just got off the phone with one of the analysts from Secure Payments. Even though we don't accept credit cards, thanks. It just shows that your MSP is forward thinking. And we really appreciate the fact that, that you paid for that service for us. Of course, I reply back, yeah, it's awesome. And that strengthens the relationship. So these are some of the benefits that also occur. Even if they don't take credit cards. If they do, and you help remove a fee that they didn't know about and make sure that they're secure, you now look like the hero, right? Now use it in a prospecting scenario and go win some customers. And this becomes a pretty powerful program.
Hey, Frank, what have you found I've got a number of questions here, but just something came up when you were saying that. What have you found for typical MSP clients that you've been going out, about what percentage of them are actually accepting credit cards?
61%. So those numbers that you saw, 61%. And that's across a few hundred MSPs that we ran through this program. We've been doing this for a little while in sort of a pilot. We wanted to make sure that we refined it. 61% is what we found. That's up from about 55%, I think was the number a few years ago. So it's
and I think a lot of people, because I know I saw some comments and questions early on in this of think, merchants and like retail shops and that type of stuff, which is not obviously the typical MSP's customers. And I think that's what I thought the first time that you and I were talking about this a year ago was, oh, well, how many MSP clients are really using credit cards? But it's like you said, 61%, that's a pretty significant risk that you've got out there of being able to go through.
Think about it this way. Every business has to get paid, right? Otherwise they wouldn't be in business. They've got to transact some way. I mean, they're not just handing cash all around, right? And I know I'm tapping and swiping a whole lot more than I ever was in the past. I mean, I have cash in my pocket for weeks now that I don't even have to go to the ATM anymore because I barely use cash, right? So think about the trending there. Well, there's businesses on the other side of it, and that parallels the shift that we see of the increase in businesses accepting electronic payments, which could be, by the way, ACH, right? It could be electronic checks. It doesn't have to be just credit cards, because that falls under the same realm and set of rules for PCI compliance as well.
A few more questions here. When you do the compliance check, do you give the client any type of documentation, PCI compliance certificate, any of that type of stuff that they get as part of that of going through the check?
Yes. So we have what we call a payment security index. And what we do is we provide that certificate to them. We have to be very careful about saying, hey, you're PCI compliant, because despite all of our efforts, if the person in your accounting department has your customers' credit card numbers written on sticky notes and taped all over the monitor, you're now not in PCI compliance, right? So there's areas here that we could be in violation of. What we're doing is we're certifying that we've worked with the vendor, and that at the best of our knowledge, that blind spot now is uncovered and there is no more PCI non-compliance fees being charged. Therefore, meaning the gateway is signaling that they are compliant.
Cool. What risk is Secure Payment accepting in this relationship, and/or what risk will the MSP still have?
So I think if we did nothing, we're kind of aware of what the risks are, what could happen. Here we're exposing it. We're not accepting a risk from a legal standpoint, saying that if something happened, that we are liable. We're here to help work with that customer to make sure that the gateway vendors are signaling that they are compliant. What we're not doing are the things that the MSP would do. So we don't want to go in there and make the MSP look bad and say, hey, we looked at your firewall and there's a port open and therefore you're not PCI compliant. We're relying on that MSP to use their expertise for that part of it, right? We're solely going into those blind areas. And let's face it, 80% of the people aren't even sure whose customers take credit cards. How can you even know if they're PCI compliant, whether it's stuff that the MSP would be liable for or anything that would be on, say, the gateway side? So I think the risks are still there as they traditionally are, but it's way lower because we're actually looking at the stuff now and paying attention to it. We've had audits done in, like I said, the financial services area for FINRA. FINRA never decides, hey, you can just do whatever you want, be not compliant, still transact. They will shut down that financial planner and fine him and not allow him to do business until he remediates whatever the issues are. This is the only industry and only set of compliance that I've seen where you could basically pay money to be not compliant and still do business. It's crazy.
Frank, couple things here. One is I know if someone select that they were interested in the poll, then we'll get you that information and you'll connect with them on that, or someone from your team will connect with them.
Yep.
There is there any other way if someone's interested in secure payments to contact you?
I mean, you could send me an email, but I do think the best way is probably to just signal your interest in the poll. We'll reach out to you. I want to make sure that we don't lose your information. Like I said, we've got 10 spots, and I want to make sure we lock in the discount for the end of the month. So best bet is probably just to go through the poll. We'll reach out. If you want to email me, you could use my email address. I could pop it into the chat here. I think that would work for everybody. So while you go to the next question, Jeff, and I'll
Okay.
just pop
Yep. Mark and Ray were both asking what's the term for secure payments?
So this is a 3-year deal. So it's 3 years. One thing that we found is the risk doesn't go away, and every year you've got to make sure that you stay compliant. So it's 3 years. We want, MSPs are in this for the long haul with us. We also know that over time those fees will build up. So the best bet is a 36-month contract.
All right. Frank, you mentioned better target clients, attorneys, et cetera. What are the ideal target verticals that you've been seeing on this that an MSP works with?
Professional services, so legal, accounting, financial, anything that falls into those categories, primarily because they're not aware of the fees. Nobody goes in there and knocks on the door to do this type of thing. And it's often overlooked because we don't, like even you had said, Jeff, like you were kind of thinking more like point of sale, like, like customers that have like, the kiosks and stuff. Those are not traditionally MSP type customers. So all this professional services, I think were the best. Those are the ones that we found the most issues. They were the most appreciative of having reduced the risk just by nature of their business. I mean, if you're an attorney and you get hit with ransomware and you had a cyber liability insurance policy and it was invalidated because you weren't PCI compliant and you never knew it, that's a pretty big deal. It's probably also a pretty good client of yours. So, you don't want that that to affect your MSP's reputation, and you don't want to lose that customer.
And something to follow up on that, when you're talking about from the risk doesn't go away, I think of what you were saying, because Ray was asking about this, could we submit the same clients annually? Is that I think what you were saying is that you actually do that audit annually automatically with the client list.
Yeah, so we have that information. We're going to go right back through that list again. So we have the dates in there that we did the prior assessment. So within 12 months, we would go through it all over again just to make sure that they still maintain their PCI compliance.
What do you end up seeing around like PayPal, Square, Stripe? even Venmo or those type of things? Is this something that needs to be going through with this on the audit? Are there compliance issues to be identified with these providers, or kind of how does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing is to find out if your customer takes electronic payments, right? So if we document this for you, in many cases, the MSP doesn't even know they're using Stripe. So once we know, and then we look and we see how they're using Stripe, we check the statements. We find out, does Stripe think they're not compliant because they didn't do some things? Maybe it could be something simple. It could be something, more complicated. We look at a variety of things. There's 9 different areas that we analyze as part of our, our proprietary assessment that we've put together. Some things are simple, like, hey, did they fill out the SAQ? We do look at fees. We look at risks related to things like card spinning, which has to do with, maybe links on a nonprofit's website. So there's a variety of areas that we look at, and we look at those each year, and we use a score, the payment security index that we came up with that helps you track it. So if you're at a 60, we originally do it, and after we help remediate, you're at a 95. That shows the improvement. The other thing that we do also is every now and again, we do happen upon a downstream customer who is fine being non-compliant and paying the fee because they don't want the hassle of going through it. In those cases, and Robin taught us, this in TMT, was to get a risk acceptance form filled out. So what we'll do is we'll work with the MSP and say, hey, Navison Country Club is not compliant. They're paying a fee. They're perfectly fine with it. What we would recommend is that you get them to sign a risk acceptance form stating that you've done the analysis. We told them they're not compliant. We've warned them of any risks, of what could happen, and have them sign off on it, right? So that goes back to that other question, Jeff, about like, who's responsible, what the risks are. At least you're covering your butt, by us doing the work and then at least pointing that out to you.
Awesome. So the only other thing that I would mention is that someone was asking about, and Jay just asked about this as well, about the recording, the slide deck. Frank, let's make sure that we get this slide deck, that we can post it up with the recording here. If you can just get that over to Carly, if she doesn't already have it there. So we'll get that out there so that you've got this if you want to take it back to someone. We will get the recording. It'll go out to everyone that registered for this webinar. It'll also be posted up on mspsuccess.com, along with all of our MSP Success webinar series recordings that are up there. That'll be posted up by sometime later today. There, I know someone was asking about those 12 items in PCI compliance, and I know it's on one of the slides. So that's why I want to make sure that they get the slides on that too.
Okay, yeah, we'll send it over.
Standpoint. So awesome, Frank. Well, great with this. I appreciate you getting on here, and for those that indicated interest on this, we'll make sure that someone on Frank's team reaches out to see if it's a right fit for you. And it may or may not be. There's 10 spots left in September with this special MSP Success discounted pricing that we've got specific for this webinar here. And good luck with all this, Frank.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. It was good to see you.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.